Ooh, engage.
Engage.
Welcome to Thoughts on Talks, where
Hi.
I, Malayna Dawn, talk to him, Reverend Mike McMorrow.
Reverend Mike with my interfaith t-shirt on.
Very nice. I was going to ask you to show that if you didn't do it on your own, but you did. And we generally pretend we're going to talk about the Sunday talk. So we start there at least. It's a starting point for a conversation. And then deep dives and digressions ensue. We somehow bring it back most of the time. It's no guarantee. Come back, come back. So yesterday's talk was May 3rd. Welcome back. You're floating in space. Interesting.
Ground control, Major Tom.
And Mike sings. I forgot to mention that. So yesterday.
Down engines on.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That's it?
When you have a strong meditation practice, you can levitate.
That'll be a goal we can all work toward.
I will teach you on Wednesday nights.
I'd like to levitate, but have like Greatest American Hero, maybe better flight control than the Greatest American Hero. Because you look like you've lost floating control. You're just floating about.
Okay.
So yesterday's talk was May 3rd, which makes today May 4th, Star Wars Day.
Go ahead, say it.
Star Wars Day, May the 4th be with you.
And also with you.
I can share a screen too. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Well,
you know, in Ireland, they say their THs and with a hard T sometimes.
That's a movie we were just talking about, The Guru. That's not Star Wars Day, but it's a funny movie. You should check it out. That sounds like a turkey. Star Wars Day, May the 4th be with you, with other things behind it too.
So if you were an Irishman from the Northwest, and you said your THs as a hard T, how would you say this if it was yesterday?
May the 3rd be with you?
Except with a hard T.
I don't want to say that out loud. Okay, so you can see that our show here, Thoughts on Talks, is not as serious as the Sunday service usually is. Not that those can't be like
little potty humor, just a little, but no more. That was the only one.
Oh, we'll see. Somebody please keep count. I'm looking at your nice haircut. Check you out.
Yes.
You want to say something about it, that it was YouTube inspired?
Yeah, it was YouTube inspired, and Stephanie was the first haircut she's ever done, and I think she did a fabulous job. And
yay, Mrs. McMorrow.
We heard from one couple that got inspired, and so she got in there and cut her husband's hair and did a nice job.
Oh, good.
So
wow. And that's why you entered. I didn't know why you entered the sanctuary as the unknown comic with a paper bag over your head initially, and then you did the big reveal. But
right.
Forgot to start sharing on Facebook Live, so you had to do it again.
I know. There's nothing worse than a joker who has to tell the same joke twice.
Well, if it's so good, it might as well be revisited. I looked up some pictures of the unknown comic. Actually, I can find one and share it from the Gong Show. And of course, he just used a plain paper bag.
Right.
Whereas you had an Olive Garden bag, and it was so big you had shoulder holes cut out.
Well, I just thought,
Yeah, it stays on better.
I just feel like if people are here on a Sunday, they deserve my best effort.
It kind of looked, here, I'll share my screen.
I was trying to figure out how to put the glasses on through the bag, but
you needed a little more space. That's why the Olive Garden bag. Yeah, the unknown comic looks like he had a much smaller bag.
I didn't see the ventriloquist act. That was pretty funny.
It's a little lunch sack.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to tell people that it's more serious on Sunday, but you walked in as the unknown comic, so I'm not sure how much they'll believe me. Not that we're trying.
I wasn't actually thinking of the unknown comic when I did that, but
Oh.
you probably would not know this. But for years, this New Orleans Saints football team was not very good. And so their fans would show up at the stadium wearing paper bags.
No, I did not know that.
They used to call themselves the Aints.
Ah, and you did say more ain't than saint at some point in your talk.
Yeah, well, that's actually out of my book. Yes.
Tell us more about your book right now, please.
Well, I have to get, I have to get it, the last bits finished.
All right. So we're going to leave our audience in anticipation.
Well, it's called Blue Collar Spirituality, Finding a God That Works. And it's written to and for working people, particularly working men, and just showing how God is all around us in our working life if we just pay attention and look for it.
Nice.
And then
and Angela Carroll Brown, who's a member of our congregation and is an author in her own right. This is one of her books that I have up on the screen. I particularly put this together because I thought that Reverend Nancy's dress yesterday looked a lot like Angela's cover. This book of Angela's is a book of poetry, and the artwork was done by Angela's father. I don't know who the artist was for Nancy's dress.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
Find
I
out.
can tell you who the artist behind her is.
That's right. Lorraine Streety.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's an artist of some renown.
Yes, I looked her up in her Molly McMole books.
Yeah.
Yeah,
hopefully one of those will hit for
her.
Hopefully one of those will hit for her. She's been in conversation about an animated feature, so.
Very cool.
Yeah. Anyway.
So, going back to the Star Wars Day idea, since it is Star Wars Day, I thought of it. You didn't really even allude to it, but my brain alluded to it as you were talking in the Sunday service yesterday. So you were talking about regrounding. What was the theme? It was the seat of the soul, right? Was the topic?
Yeah.
So you mentioned regrounding, and I thought of Yoda in his swamp and training Luke Skywalker to ground himself in the Force. You talked about alignment, and I thought, well, that's kind of what the Force is. And I'm going to look up the Force, the definition of the Force. How about that? Because it has that in the
it flows through you and in you and all around you.
And it connects everything in the universe. Here, I found it. I will screen share.
But beware of the dark side.
Do you have all the lines memorized? So here it is from Star Wars Glossary, The Force. And it says, it's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, and binds the galaxy together. And so aligning with that force is what we do when we connect with spirit. And then you said the Jewish mystic Jesus arrived at a time when there was an imperial power and the empire. So I'm like, okay, there's the empire. And
Wow.
I heard do 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 in my and then you said that Jesus taught us to love God and our neighbor as ourselves, and that he was speaking to humans' deep fear of death, and that's everybody's afraid of the Death Star in Star Wars.
Wow. You are a great dot connector.
So I just enjoyed that. That now I can share it on May 4th,
Yeah.
Star Wars Day,
And may the fourth be with you.
May the 4th be with
Malayna.
you. Thank you.
Suffering
So,
succotash.
huh?
Suffering succotash.
Yeah, it does feel like you're lisping when you say that. Last year's fundraising event was aimed for May the 4th. We ended up having it on May the 3rd.
It was May the 4th on the 5th, wasn't it?
Was it the 5th? I think it was on the 3rd.
Oh.
It was not on the 4th in either case.
Yes.
But I was thinking about that and how I started attending the Center for Spiritual Living in Granada Hills, about a year before, a year ago, which was the May 4th Star Wars thing. And you were promoting, it was a magic-based event.
Oh, yes, uh-huh.
And I had just joined and I didn't really know that many people, and it was too much. I was trying to toe in very carefully, and so I didn't attend that one. And then, a year later, I heard the Star Wars theme, and I'm like, that's something I can get behind. I think I would like to attend that. And I had such fun taking pictures with Darth Vader and having a lightsaber battle, at least enough for a camera to capture.
Yeah.
And
Paul was a great Darth Vader, and
he had a little Luke Skywalker, his
son. Mini Darth.
It was so cute. Yeah.
They really were.
Yeah. So those are things that now for this year, the same event has now been moved to the fall because of the pandemic and all of the things connected with it.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting time to be in the world but not of it, which was the next thing I made a note of from your talk.
Yeah.
I mean, we're also reminded how we're all connected through this. So we're all of something. I mean, there's so many memes and images I found for in the world but not of it. And it's one of those things, it's not actually said in that way in the Bible, is it? From Romans 12:2.
Yeah. Did I get it backwards?
I don't know. I didn't write down where you said it's from. You didn't do anything wrong. This is not a critique.
Oh.
But I'm just thinking, and there's also John. There's a few different things that came up when I just did a search for in the world, but not of the world.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if this is part of what justifies for some people not being good shepherds of the earth. That we're not of the world, we're from out of this world. I've seen that used in sort of Christian.
Well, I think it's actually more rooted in the Old Testament.
Okay.
And I think when people came over in the 17th century, when they, with the Pilgrims and all that,
Mm-hmm.
they came armed with an axe, a flintlock, and a Bible, and that that the new world was seen just as that it was almost like a new Jerusalem. And so in the book of Genesis, of course, in the creation story, God gives man dominion over the earth. And I think that really was part of the ethos from which our country, I should say, was founded. I mean, because you have to imagine, it's hard for modern people to imagine. But first of all, you make it across the ocean in a tiny boat. You know, I think these boats were like 75 feet long or something like that, which is, you know, that's a small boat to when you're, particularly if it's going to take you 6 weeks to, you know, 2+ months to get across the ocean in horrible conditions.
Yeah, these are not cruise liners.
Right. Well, and then you get there, and of course, there's no dock, right?
Right.
You have to find some place to anchor, and then, you know, the trees come right to the tree line, and
Right to the shoreline,
right to the shoreline, rather. And so I grew up in Washington State. You know, I don't know what it was like where the Pilgrims landed, but in Washington State, you know, there's no such thing as going for a nice walk in the woods, because it's grown so tight that all the branches are intertwined. There's the salal or sometimes blackberries are underneath that. It's very forbidding, man. You have to like fight your way into it.
Wow.
So, you know, and even in Europe, the Black Forest, you know, a lot of these fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel and you know, I mean, they come out of these dark areas in the forest, right? Where of course a lot of the so-called pagan energies lived also.
Yeah.
So I think it was more rooted in that Old Testament idea of this is ours.
Right.
And it's our divine right to do with it whatever we will. And that was a common theme, I think, even tied probably, you know, I don't know this specifically, but it would not surprise me to learn that was tied to the idea of manifest destiny also.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So nature was seen as something to be conquered,
right,
rather than worked with.
So, but
I don't know that actually, you know, maybe Thoreau, I suppose, kind of started us thinking on that way. But, you know, I remember as a kid, it wasn't until Silent Spring with Rachel Carson. Her book came out about DDT and the thinning of eagle and duck shells.
Wow.
And how DDT was affecting the whole ecosystem of our waterways. So there's a digression for you.
Yeah, and that's the first time you really thought of ecology, or?
When I was a kid?
Yeah.
Well, that's when I became aware of it. Now, mind you, when in the 8th grade, Love Canal in Ohio caught on fire. It was so polluted. There were no fish in Lake Erie. It was awful.
Okay.
They had just been using rivers, particularly back east, for dumping grounds, and, industry, and so forth. You know, the other thing that was happening was because we had nuclear reactors even then, and they would use the water to cool the reactor and then discharge it. So it wasn't radioactive or anything like that, but it was slightly warmer.
Okay.
Right? And so it raised the temperature downstream of the water, which also affected the ecosystem, which helped, you know, algae to bloom, and then the algae takes all the oxygen out of the water, and then the fish can't breathe, and so then they had these big die-offs that were happening with the local fisheries also. So we've come a long way with that, and you know, it was actually President Nixon who instituted all of those things.
Wow.
So he, deservedly so, got hammered about Watergate because, which was,
which is not about water at all.
No. but he did institute the Clean Water Act, and a lot of really great, and I mean, it really was the start of the environmental movement in the United States at that time.
So I think by the time I was paying attention to anything as a kid, I was already seeing Iron Eyes Cody, the Native American, on the commercials crying about litter.
Right.
And, Smokey the Bear saying, don't start forest fires. So already for the mass media, there was an awareness that I grew up with of like, you have to be careful because what you do affects the planet, affects nature. But really, when I hear the term in the world but not of it, I take it to mean that we are, more of a connection to business or finance or society, that we act within this framework, but that we're connected to a higher power from within us, that we're connected to spirit, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So that's probably what you were referring to,
right?
When we're talking.
So the idea that, just that the short-term gain of today versus, or how about just living from principle rather than the short-term advantage of daily life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you can take that principle. So we use principle as God consciousness, right? But you could also use it as principle from a small p, which would be, from a sense of moral code, such as we have from the tradition of Judaism with the, 10 Commandments. It could be that as well. So,
right.
Anyway.
So another thing, you said we're seated in the soul right after that. So that is, where we like rest in our center and be in the inner world first.
Right. And of course, you probably recognize that as a title of Gary Zukav's book.
Right.
That was huge in the 90s.
Yeah.
Or 80s, I think, actually.
Maybe late 80s.
Yeah.
I can put the...
It was Zukav's Seat of the Soul, and before that it was Scott Peck's
Road Less Traveled?
Road Less Traveled, which of course was taken from the Thoreau, not Thoreau, Robert Frost, right?
That sounds right.
Robert Frost poem. But maybe Thoreau wrote it also. All this time I thought it was Thoreau until I read Robert. Oh, look at all the different covers.
Yeah, Seat of the Soul.
He must have built a nice vacation home off of that book.
Yeah, I know. There he is with Oprah on Super Soul.
Yeah, he's been on there a lot.
Yeah.
He's not the most dynamic guy to see.
Sometimes that's why people are authors, because they're not great speakers, presenters.
Well, and he was brilliant. I'm glad that when I saw him, his new wife was with him.
Yeah.
She was very dynamic, and she really lifted the energy in the place.
Okay.
And but anyway, he wrote a good book. He wrote a couple of good books. Before that one, he wrote Dance of the Wu Li Masters, where he made this connection between quantum mechanics or quantum phenomena and spirituality. So perfect timing in the as this idea of New Age came out, although I've always not liked. Sometimes
That,
people call us a New Age religion, and that really bugs me.
yeah, because New Age is more focused on sort of outward, well, it's an outward focus, I think. Is that a good way? It's like crystals and almost magical thinking.
Yeah, magical. Well, I mean, one could argue that any religion is magical thinking, but
Or can be, depending on how you use it and interpret it.
well, they take phenomena, let's say crystals, for instance. So they take a phenomena like crystals, which have a true phenomena, right? So they do have a vibration, and you can cut them in a particular way, and certain crystals have different harmonic, right? But these forces are so small. I mean, you have to have really sensitive instrumentation to measure any of this stuff anyway. But, you know, and if you believe the idea that it's done unto you as you believe, and that if you believe that that crystal has some power, then you're going to get it, right?
So it can be a useful tool.
If it helps you, I mean, on the one hand, it's whatever gets you through the night, right?
Right.
I just don't appreciate it when our movement is attached to it, because I feel like it oversimplifies what we do.
Yeah, New Age feels a little more woo-woo.
Yeah.
New Thought is really focused on inner exploration and action. At least that's sort of how I'm.
Well, you know, at its best, it's about taking responsibility for our own lives and understanding, which it's sort of almost a Buddhist practice in a way, because we understand that through right thinking, we can affect change for good. Now, the one thing that Buddhism does a little better in some ways is that, you know, we don't really, in religious science, we don't deal with the shadow per se. It depends on the minister. The minister is provoking people to deal with, you know, the aspects of the shadow that are not congruent with their highest expression, right? And then people within that spiritual community will be doing that. In Buddhism, of course, you're observing these things, you know, when you're through the practice of meditation, you're observing these things, but the outcome then is right thought, right employment, you know, right practice, and the other aspects of the Eightfold Path.
I see, yeah.
So we're a little, so it's a little more passive, kind of a passive thing in Buddhism, from my perspective as a non-practicing Buddhist. But someone who really appreciates Buddhist practice and writings.
Yeah.
But religious science is basically saying, you know, there's a way that you can prove that God exists, and that's through the demonstration of its presence in your own life, as health, as creative expression, as relationships that are peaceful, harmonious, and fulfilling, and having a life that's prosperous and enough, if not, also from a place of overflow.
I like the Irish quote you shared, enough is as good as a feast.
Yes, that was my grandmother's favorite. Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and I remember as a kid going, huh?
Yeah. No, it's not. I want a feast.
I don't know, well, because I would think, oh, a feast, you know, like Christmas, you know, like, or Thanksgiving, you know, a feast.
Right.
Right? But that idea, and I don't know that I really appreciated it until I became an adult. Really.
Yeah, and I mean, if you take it apart and think about it a little bit, when you have enough, you don't need the overflow unless it's to share with others.
And
it is as good.
and really the only way that and it's actually kind of an interesting metaphor for the way that we often live, right? So the only way you could eat more, right, is if you took a trip to the bathroom and eliminated some baggage and then came back.
There you are with the
who wants to do that? Right? So I can't even think of a food that I'd want to go do that for.
No.
Unless I overate it, and then it'd be another story. But when you think about some of and I think this COVID thing has maybe brought this into focus. There are many ways that we have overindulged, particularly in the West, and particularly in America, right, where even our poorest people live much better. The standard of living, no matter how much struggle there is in it, is certainly better than probably 5 billion people on the planet, if not 6. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Even a homeless person in our country can, at least with a little bit of initiative, can get a disability check, so they can at least get enough to eat for 3 weeks out of the month.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have to live on the street and they have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know that the rest of the planet even has that, which...
Not all of it. I mean,
outside of the developed world.
Right, yeah. Then they're really on their own.
Those kids down in Brazil, right, who pick through the garbage piles. And,
yeah.
And what's going on in Yemen right now. Or Lebanon, or where any of these refugees are, or,
Yeah.
There's a lot of suffering out there that, thankfully we don't have to deal with.
Yes. Even knowing that the world has probably changed in many ways forever from this point forward, most of the people I know have been able to weather it really quite comfortably with very little actual change to their life. Maybe they're not going to work, but they're still in their home, and the water's on, and the air is on, and the bed is there, and the TV works. And so, we're pretty comfortable. We're pretty blessed and fortunate that way.
Well, yeah, and there's just a lot that we take for granted. I mean, you just mentioned something like, water. I mean, having clean water is something that many people on the planet have to either walk a long way to get, and then many of us wouldn't even call it clean by the time they got it, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know what to do to address all of that, but I am hopeful that so many things are being brought to our attention.
And that enough of us are paying attention.
Well, and we're at a very interesting nexus point right now, because we came out of 2008, and any thinking person had, who wasn't in the top 10% or even the top 20%, had to have come to the conclusion that this system that we have is not sustainable. Right? That we finally reached a place in this idea of the market that has a limit, right? And I think even when I was a young man, we didn't really see markets as being limited. That was a big push into moving all of our companies offshore to China, was to get into that market and expand that market. And, they did all that. And now look, here we are.
Yeah.
Right? We need masks, and they're all stuck in China. Right? American companies. So we've created this monster. Right? So my point is not to bang on capitalism so much, because I actually believe in capitalism. I do think it's a great innovator. Right? But we can't forget that the thing that's driving it is greed. Always. It's not to build a new widget just because I'm curious and I think it would be fun.
Right.
Some may be, motivated that way.
Yeah.
But most, and maybe you would be motivated that way after your first 10 million. I don't know. But I suspect, if it's like most of the developers I've worked with, if you make the 10 million, then you want to stretch it out to see if you can make 20 million. And for no other reason, so that you can tell the guy that you've been competing with all these years, hey.
Right. I'm the winner.
See how I took that off camera? But everybody knows what I'm doing, right?
Especially now that you pointed it out.
But so it's not sustainable, but it's still the best system that we have if we just tweak it a little bit. And people at the top who are running the show, right? Because the other part about capitalism is that it has this exploitation component to it.
Right.
Exploited, we have to compete with, other countries. Well, is that really true?
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we are told, but was it really true? I mean, if we had been content to make the profits within our own country or within the developed world, including, because part of it is we passed off the ecological costs also onto China and Vietnam and Thailand and Cambodia, right? And the child labor costs, right?
Yeah.
So there's this moral cost that we also offshored, right?
Yeah,
so,
I mean, even sending our trash to other countries,
or
our ships that are falling apart and rusting and have toxic goo coming out, sent off to another shore for other people's children to clean up, or poor people to clean up,
or to live in.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I think people are starting to get, we can't do that. I mean, even Wuhan, when it was shut down, all of a sudden they could see their skyline.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so we've seen this in simple ways.
Yeah.
I saw some numbers. Our carbon footprint this year, they're estimating to be 8% lower than last year. That's pretty freaking impressive.
Yeah.
So if we can figure out how to get people back to work without having to get in their cars, I mean, it's going to have to be transitioned.
Right.
Right.
But we've already kind of started the transition. I mean, some people are working from home and
so imagine, so then, because it gets bigger, right? So imagine, so now commercial buildings, right? So businesses figure out they don't need these big offices. Well, then the municipalities figure out, well, if we change the zoning requirements, we can house people.
Right.
In those places.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you have a whole column of economic activity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some interesting things that could come of this.
Yeah.
And I, probably wouldn't see it in my lifetime because these things take time. But
I would like to see it happen very quickly. within your lifetime. Certainly, there's plenty of time.
Well, I'm older than you are, but
yeah, but not that much older.
I guess I'm cynical about that part.
Yeah,
but,
but
as a person who believes in the power of consciousness, I guess is to bring it kind of back around. Mm-hmm. We are in this unique nexus of calamity and opportunity, really, that presented itself, and our memory is not so bad that we don't remember. Many of us, not so much myself. Well, it could have been if I hadn't transitioned into ministry, right? So, then there because there does seem to be this flow of divine providence as you're preparing yourself for opportunity that then presents itself, even when sometimes you're just pursuing an interest,
right,
for your own edification. Right?
But that's that divine guidance, that inner compass that's doing
Right.
the guiding.
Well, and that is to be in the world and not of it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
instead of, go, 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 chasing dollars in the early 2000s, I was taking science of mind classes and, getting my thinking straightened out.
And not limiting yourself by the ways we've been told we ought to or should limit ourselves because this is the way the world is. When we're in the world but not of it, we can see beyond those imaginary walls and limitations.
Well, yeah, and then then it's also important to attract, and this is the thing, like Thoreau said that, you meet your success in uncommon hours, right? Because you draw to you people and material and opportunities that you need for your success.
And also take your blinders off so that you can see those when they're there.
Exactly. And this is the value of spiritual community, particularly in a denomination such as ours, which is actively cultivating a couple things. One, to understand, like Jesus taught, to take it back to that there's only one power, and that's God, whatever name you want to call it, right? And that devotion to that above all things, brings in a certain dividend, both spiritually, in all ways, and then to love our neighbor as ourselves. So now we're seeking ways to bring heaven here on earth.
Right.
So our business activity then is still maybe driven by capitalism, but we're actively seeking ways that are profitable for everyone.
And sustainable for everyone.
Yes, exactly. So that, and so as a former general contractor, I would tell my subs, like they would be trying to, I said, hey man, I can't pay for your beamer on this one job, right? So let's, get out your pencil, sharpen your pencil, and let's make this thing work. I want you to make a profit because I want you to be around for the next job because we have a lot more ahead of us to do.
Right.
See, that's a long-term view.
And
I don't even know if that's possible in a short-term corporate mindset, which is what's been driving. I mean, so there's just a few little tweaks, just like within our own life. Just a few little tweaks, right? So, if we're going around thinking that we're all, we're superhuman because our belief system says that we're saved and that everyone else can pound salt because the poor bastards aren't saved, so they're not part of the club, right? And we can exclude all kinds of people with disparate ideas. And liberals can do that too, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, because the other part of this equation is we are going to have to bring some conservative principles into the mix so that things can be sustainable.
Right.
And I think
and inclusive, really.
Right. So let's just make a broad generalization where progressives want to make everything inclusive, right? And they're afraid for those who are on the fringes. And conservatives I think conservatives really do want to make it sustainable. And so we can't afford to do this. The truth is that we've got to figure out how to do both.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we've been caught up in our little tribes, right?
Yeah.
So we had an opportunity, for instance, to create one large health network, but half of the states opted to not participate over an ideological issue. So we don't have the luxury of that anymore, I guess is what I'm getting at. That the virus is pointing out, okay, we can do things together when we have a big enough reason to do it.
Right.
And that I think we're seeing the possibility of the great potential around that.
Yeah.
So,
and to take it back to something you said in your talk, a quote by Saint Teresa of Avila.
yeah. Wasn't that a great quote? I can't believe I didn't find that. I mean, people have lifted bits of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yours are the hands through which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes. You are his body. Christ has no body now on earth but yours. I've heard, that we are the hands and the feet of God, which I've always liked because that puts the action within us and not out there waiting for someone or an outside God to save us or do anything to fix anything. It needs to be our action, our choice.
Can you expand on that a little bit while I go check and see why it's hot in here still?
Okay. And there he goes. So the traditional idea of an outside God, a sky God, one that we are looking outside of ourselves for divine intervention, is traditional religion, really. It doesn't matter which religion it is. And New Thought, especially, as well as mystics of all the different religions, move that divinity within us, and we work from that point. So if the divine is within us and also interwoven in the world, then we are the divine working through us as us. You can watch back later, Rev, and see how I did with my vamping while you were gone.
Well, the vibe was nice. I know that heaven and hell are states of consciousness, but it was getting really hot in here. And in fact, I had the heat on instead of the cool.
That explains it.
Yes. Because while you're talking, I'm thinking, God, it's hot in here. Am I going to have to? So then I'm like, am I going to have to call Paul over here and get, this thing looked at? Blah, 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 blah. And then it occurred to me, you know what? I bet I put the heat on.
Yours are the hands and yours are the feet.
Exactly. I mean, that is how that connection came.
Yay. So, I mean, it works like that too. That the grand ideas ought to work in daily life.
Yes.
And help us find our way.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So let's see what else I have from our notes. You said the Easter construct, to take it beyond the Easter construct. Do you remember what you were referring to? I thought it was interesting.
Well, the Easter construct is that what I meant by that, it was just a term I made up because we are a faith community that has different religious, people have differing religions of origin, and people have healed their differences with that to varying degrees. And some people have no connection with Christianity at all, or maybe even have. What I'm really wanting to do is to heal a negative impression of Christianity because of the perceptions of, because it's gotten so tied up politically now.
Right, yeah.
And also culturally, that stuff too. But there's
almost been appropriated. There's been a cultural appropriation of Christianity in a strange way. I like
it certainly has been attempted, I would say.
Yeah.
Because they got a taste of the power, right? Some of them. So I don't want to get off on all that, but just that my attempt is to heal that. So then in calling the whole resurrection story an Easter construct, right? and I'll tell you
Bringing it
what that's
back
based on.
to the mystical aspect, right?
Well, I mean, the idea that some dude rose from the dead is a pretty mystical idea.
Mm-hmm.
But more to the point of, I had a thing that happened in October when I was up in Kelowna. I don't know if I told you about this. We were staying at this, it was sort of a dude ranch. It wasn't really a dude ranch, but it's kind of a B&B on some land up in British Columbia.
Mm.
And it turned out that the husband and wife who had the place were former Christian missionaries. So when it came out that I was a minister, the ears perked right up, right? And I knew what that meant. I'm like, okay. Because, we're seen as kind of heretics in a way from that group.
Yeah, I've experienced that as like the sort of testing of like, oh, so you know what they say in John 2:12,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And
yeah, thou shalt not preach to the heathen. So so anyway, they invited us to a little fire circle, and then of course, the testimony came out, and oh yeah, well, tell me what it is that you teach, and they really don't. They're just looking for a reason to quote some little this and that. But right. I try not to practice contempt prior to investigation.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the way it ended up, and so finally, the man said, and very nice people, by the way, super nice.
That's them right now.
Super nice people.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, well, gosh, if it wasn't for Jesus rising from the dead, then the whole thing doesn't add up. And I said, well, why we got it? I do not think that at all. You don't? I said, no, absolutely not. There is so much richness in how to live your life today successfully and have a meaningful relationship with the divine and a strategy for creating good in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's just so I really don't see why you say that. Because I'm not afraid of meeting my creator, because I don't think it really works that way anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them what I always say, the truth is that when we die, we're all going to be very surprised on the other side, because it's going to be different than we think it is.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it'll be what we think it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so that's the impetus of that, because that was my way of, I like to promote the idea of Christianity the way from the sayings gospel, I suppose, without the dog, because all the other stuff is interpretations from humans. And the fact of the matter is people were scratched, as soon as he was gone, people were scratching their heads trying to figure out what the hell he meant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and
because all these gospels got written, way after the fact. And Paul didn't know it. Paul knew, Peter and James and all them, and he got into trouble with, James and the Jerusalem church and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was really committed to bringing the message to the Gentiles.
Right.
But they were still arguing about, whether it was a Jewish sect,
mm-hmm.
right? Or is it something else?
Right.
So the whole thing is, there's really a lot more to be interested in there rather than to be discounted because some overzealous new convert, got in our grill.
Right.
And, and wouldn't take no for an answer.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe there is so much mystery around it that's what's kept people interested for a few thousand years, that, you know, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. So what does it mean that it, you know,
Well, and
resonated with all these people, and what does it mean in the teachings, and who wrote what? And there's just so much mystery that people have spent lifetimes trying to figure it out, and we still don't know.
Teresa of Avila, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you are God on earth.
Mm-hmm.
You are Christ on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know much about her, but I have a feeling she probably took a hit from that.
Yeah.
Right. So first of all, it's because she thought it and said it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the other part was because she was a woman saying it.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
Anyway, and,
Yeah.
it's all we had for, I mean, it got us through the dark ages. You can argue however you want to on that.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as a civilized, what was it? Plato called it a noble purpose, noble thought.
Want me to look it up?
Be sure.
Okay.
I think it was. I think it was Plato. Maybe it was Aristotle. Yeah.
When I put in Plato and noble, what comes up is a noble lie.
A noble lie, yes. Well, it may be a lie, but I know noble purpose comes from Paul Atreides and Do. Oh, it's not that, but the idea that the Christian noble code as just a code to live by, which is an extension of Jewish thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? With a little Messiah thing thrown in there. But again, we're humans, so we'll figure out the differences and how to exploit them.
Yeah, we're difficult creatures, aren't we?
Yeah.
So then at the end, the last few notes that I made were curiosity, discovery, and evolution, and how that's kind of our loop as the cosmic creative process, and that we step into consciousness and co-create a greater yet to be. And I think there was a Thomas Troward slide or quote that you showed.
It is the power of the human soul to differentiate limitlessly from the infinite, so that we are apt or likely to overlook. But as we come to realize that the soul is itself a reflection and image of the infinite spirit, and a clear recognition of the cosmic creative process shows that it can't be anything else. That's why people don't like Troward.
Because long sentences,
right,
that don't lend themselves to images.
Right. So he could say it is the power of the human soul to differentiate limitlessly from the infinite that we are likely to overlook, which is the whole reason of the creative process. But instead, he says, puts in these amplifiers.
Yeah.
The power of the human soul to differentiate limitlessly from the infinite that we are often likely to overlook. But as we come to realize that the soul itself is a reflection and image of the spirit, of the infinite spirit, and a clear recognition of the cosmic process shows that it can't be anything else, we find that it must possess this power, and that in fact it is our possession of this power, which is the whole purpose of the creative process. If the human soul did not possess an unlimited power of differentiation from the infinite, then the infinite would not be reflected in it. And consequently, the infinite spirit would find no outlet for its conscious recognition of itself as life, love, and beauty, which it is.
That is a really long explanation.
Really long. And that's Thomas
Troward.
Troward.
I found this slightly younger picture of Thomas Troward because I was like, yeah, he's smart. He looked into things, and it's only one old picture. Oops, I'm moving it around too much. Oops, I went somewhere else. Let's go back. It's from a YouTube called Mental Science Simplified.
Yeah.
It's slightly younger, or they just darkened, but I think he looks a little younger there. Because I was trying to think, you know, what would make him a little more palatable to the modern brain? Because a lot of times that old language style, especially he was a judge, you know, so he's using a lot of linguistics.
Well, and I think, you know, when you study things from an academic perspective, you can tend to be pedantic, I believe.
Yeah. I think...
and he was a trained lawyer, right? So he was a judge. So
I have a feeling the cable guy is here right now. So, or, you know, they're trying to boost our internet because we've been having trouble. So I may need
Jim Carrey's at your house?
Huh?
Jim Carrey's at your house?
Thank God, no, not that version of Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey as like the esoteric thinker, he's welcome here with his big beard. But Jim Carrey, the cable guy, I don't think I can handle him. So, as I watch the guy come up to the front door, I think it's a good time to end our conversation because I might not have internet in a minute.
Very good.
Yeah.
Right.
So thanks for joining us on Thoughts on Talks.
Yes, and thoughts on a lot of other things today.
That's right. But we tied it back into the talk.
Yeah.
You did a good job.
Got there eventually. All right.
And, you know, join us next time.
Yeah, have a great week. You can reach either one of us through cslgh.org. So you can reach me, Rev Mike at cslgh.org, or you can reach Malayna at admin@cslgh.org, or you can send it to me. I won't take it personally, and I'll send it on to Malayna. You can tell her how great her hair looks in quarantine.
Yeah, thank you. Cut it myself using YouTube.
Nice. All right. Well, peace and blessings to you all. Bye now.
Bye. Now you get to stop recording.